Hi, my name is Valerie Mingo.
Good day, sir. Before I'm going to start my discussion, I introduce myself. My name is Valerie Mingo, BSIT 4A. Our discussion is all about hierarchical cluster analysis. Ang hierarchical cluster analysis o hierarchical clustering ay isang pangkalahatang diskarte sa isang cluster analysis, kung saan ang object ay pagsamasamahin ang mga bagay o records na malapit sa isa't isa. Ang isang mahalagang bahagi ng pagsusuri ay ang paulit-ulit na pagkakuha ng mga sukat ng distansya sa pagitan ng mga bagay at sa pagitan ng mga kumpol kapag ang mga bagay ay nagsisimulang igrupo sa mga kumpol. Ang kinalabasan ay graphic na kinatawan bilang isang dendrogram. In contrast to non-hierarchical cluster analysis or hierarchical cluster analysis formed cluster iteratively by successively joining or splitting group. These are two kinds of hierarchical cluster analysis. One is divisive, which start with the entire dataset in one large group and then successively split into smaller groups until its observation its own group. And number two, agglomerative, in which each observation start an own group, and groups are successively paired until at the end every observation in the same large group. Divisive methods are computationally intensive and have had limited application in the social sciences. Agglomerative methods have been implemented in many standard software packages. Hierarchical cluster analysis is an algorithm used to group the data points with similar properties. The groups are termed as clusters. As a result of hierarchical clustering, we get a set of clusters where these clusters are different from each other. Clustering of this data into clusters is classified as agglomerative clustering, involving decomposition of cluster using bottom-up strategy. And divisive clustering is involving decomposition of cluster using top-down strategy. So, this is an example of hierarchical clustering analysis. So, two group of hierarchical clustering analysis, divisive and agglomerative. There are two main categories of method of hierarchical cluster analysis are divisive methods and agglomerative methods. The algorithm for agglomerative hierarchical clustering is calculate the similarity of one cluster with all the other clusters, or calculate proximity matrix. Consider every data point as an individual cluster. Merge the clusters which are highly similar or close to each other. Recalculate the proximity matrix for each cluster. Repeat step 3 and 4 until only a single cluster remains. Let's see the graphical representation of each algorithm using a dendrogram. There are the basic method that generate hierarchical clustering is agglomerative and divisive. Agglomerative is initially considered every data points an individual cluster, and at every step merge the nearest pairs of the cluster. It's it is a bottom-up method. At first, every dataset is considered as an individual entity or cluster. At every iteration, the clusters merge with different clusters until one cluster is formed. This is an example of agglomerative hierarchical clustering. So let's say we have 6 data points A, B, C, D, E, and F. So, step 1. Consider its alphabet as a single cluster and calculate the distance of one cluster from all the other cluster. Step 2. In the second step, comparable clusters are merged together to form a single cluster. Let's say cluster B and cluster C are very similar to each other. Therefore, we merge them in the second step similarity to cluster D and E, and at last we get the cluster A and BC and D, E, and F. Step 3. We recalculate the proximity according to the algorithm and merge the two nearest cluster DA and F together to form new cluster as A and BC and then DEF. Step 4. Repeating the same process, the cluster DEF and BC are comparable and merge together to form a new cluster. We're now left with cluster A, and then so to all BCDEF. And step 5. At last, the two remaining clusters are merged together to form a single cluster A, B, C, D, E, F. Second, divisive. We can say that the divisive hierarchical clustering is precisely the opposite of the agglomerative hierarchical clustering. And divisive hierarchical clustering, we take into account all of the data points as a single cluster, and then every iteration, we separate the data points from the cluster which aren't comparable, and the end. We are left with a cluster. So, this is an example of divisive. So, this is another example of hierarchical taxonomy of the animal kingdom. So, animal subcluster are fish, mammals, and birds for instance, because are birds which can fly and those that can't. But until we reach dogs and cats, the dogs and cats into different breeds. So, we have animals, fish, mammals, and birds. So, mammals, we have dogs, cats. So, birds is penguin, emo, kiwi. So, that we have different animals of hierarchical clustering analysis. At doon nagtatapos ang aking discussion. That's all. Thank you.